Now, the French government is launching a national consultation on its climate change roadmap today. The initiative comes amid warnings that the country must prepare for temperatures of 4 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels at the end of this century. According to France's Minister for Ecological Transition, the most optimistic scenario would be by the year 2100, a 2-degree increase for metropolitan France. But they say a 4-degree increase is actually more likely. To tell us a bit more, Valerie de Camp, our environment editor, is with me. And Valerie, just tell us, first of all, about this consultation that's kicking off today.
Right. So essentially what the government is saying is that we cannot rule out the possibility that the country will hit the 4 degrees warming mark. And that is pretty significant because that is saying, hey, we're actually preparing for a pretty grim scenario, considering that under the Paris Agreement, the world should aim to cap global temperatures at 2 degrees Celsius of warming. So the point of this public consultation, as you mentioned, will be to try and define a climate change roadmap for adaptation. So it's not only about how we reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but also how do we adapt to the reality, to the real life consequences of climate change. So it will last until the end of summer. It's only just beginning, and it will serve as the basis for a climate change adaptation plan that the government will release later by the end of the year. So they're looking at different scenarios: 2 degrees of warming, 4 degrees of warming, the more pessimistic scenario, bearing in mind that the world is already on track for a temperature rise of between 2.4 and 2.8 degrees of warming. We also know that 2022 was the warmest year on record for France. So let's face it, 4 degrees of warming, that's not just a far-fetched scenario. That is a real possibility. It doesn't mean that France will potentially hit that mark of 4 degrees, but the country needs to prepare for that possibility. So they're going to launch a nationwide plan for more recurrent droughts. Also, how do we make sure that farmers can adapt to that new reality, renovate schools, homes, just thinking about how French people 20 years from now will go on about their daily lives if we're not able to rein in emissions in time.
And Valerie, one thing we know at the moment is that Europe is warming faster than other parts of the world. Spell out what the implications of that are, particularly here in France.
Right. So globally, global temperatures have increased by 1.2 degrees. But as you say, Europe is warming twice as fast as the rest of the world. And so 1.2 degrees globally, that already has translated into 1.7 degrees of warming here in France. So half a degree, an additional half a degree than the rest of the world. And I want to show you this graph here that I think it's really quite interesting, because you see that if temperatures rise by 1.5 degrees, that's 2 degrees here in France, 2 degrees by the middle of the century, that's going to mean 2.7 degrees of warming in France, and then 3 degrees of warming by the end of the century. That's the 4 degrees that France is preparing for. So again, very much real climate warming projections. And so the reason why Europe is warming faster than the rest of the world is pretty simple. Is because the percentage of landmass is a lot higher in Europe, and so it warms a lot faster than the sea. And so that is one of the explanations, which means, and that is why scientists are saying that Europe has become a heat wave hotspot. And the consequences of that are very much real here in France. And as part of this consultation, for example, in that scenario that the government is working on, there could be 4 times as many droughts in the future. Tropical storms could increase by 50%, and that could have real consequences for the economy. France's GDP could drop by 6 or 13%. So all of that, again, not a far-fetched scenario, but things that France needs to be preparing for.
Valerie de Camp, thank you very much indeed for coming in to tell us a little bit about that plan. Thank you very much.